Hey, what's going on everyone? My name is Jared and welcome to the channel. If this is your first time seeing me on this channel, this is my actual first real video, real YouTube style video that I'm doing. And it's gonna be a little bit longer than the shorts that I've been putting up, but I've got a lot to talk about. As you can see, there's a lot of stuff here on the desk. Let me give you a little introduction about myself. I'm a filmmaker and photographer based out of Florida, and I shoot everything from landscape to portraits to brand photography and videography. So I kind of covered the spectrum, and that's going to actually come into play here when I explain why I decided to switch from the original OG Komodo to this guy right here. So for those of you who don't know, Nikon actually acquired RED Cinema cameras about a year and a half ago. So the entire RED Cinema line is now owned and operated by Nikon, and the Komodo X with the Z-Mount and the V-Raptor with the Z-Mount are sort of the first collaborations between the two brands. I can imagine in the future, we're gonna see a lot more collaboration. I imagine one of the big things that is possibly being worked on, and this is just speculation, the hybrid Nikon cameras are probably going to get some sort of raw R3D support from the RED side so that you can shoot raw inside of those internally or externally so they can take advantage of the RED raw support. That was obviously a big reason why the two companies merged. There's a whole other slew of videos. You can check that out if you want to know more about sort of why they decided to merge and sort of the legal battle they had been going through for a while. But that's not the point of this video today. Today's video is about all these lenses that I have here, and even this guy right here, which is the Nikon Zf. We're going to jump into why I decided to originally purchase the Nikon Zf and why I decided to sell my original Komodo and purchase the Komodo X with the Z-Mount. And we're also going to do a quick, real fast, dirty autofocus test, because autofocus is really the elephant in the room, and a lot of people have been asking sort of what that looks like on the new body and what that looks like in the new system, along with some of the new features that they unlocked or updated in this version of the RED Komodo. So let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, so the first thing we're going to jump into is why I decided to purchase this Nikon Zf. This is actually the first Nikon camera I've ever owned. For the longest time, I shot Sony for probably over 10 years now. That's all I've really shot. I've always had some version of a Sony body in my kit. Because I've used Sony for so long, I have a plethora of Sony lenses in my kit. And I did not sell any of my Sony lenses, and we're going to talk about that coming up in just a second. But I do want to preface this to everybody out there, because I know gear is really important. A lot of people out there say gear is not important. It's the creative. And that is so true. You should be able to create on anything, and the best camera that you have is the one that you have with you at all times. So obviously that could be an iPhone, or that could be, you know, a point and shoot, or whatever the camera is you have on hand. So those statements and values definitely hold true. But I will say that the gear you have also makes you want to create and inspire you to create in different ways. And each piece of gear does have its quirks. But for the most part, all of the companies are amazing. The Canon bodies that are out right now are amazing. Their lenses are amazing. Sony, same thing. Their bodies and lenses are amazing. Right now, I'm actually shooting this on a Fuji GFX 102, and that's amazing. And that has its own quirks, and it has its own pluses and minuses. And then that's the same thing that goes with like cinema line cameras. I didn't buy the Komodo X and upgrade from the OG Komodo because I was going to get better quality. I upgraded it because it was going to make me more creative by opening up a lot more in my lens kit and the ability to use this particular body with the lenses I already have. If you've ever tried to jump ship from one company to another out there, you'll know right away that it's really hard, because adapting lenses gets expensive, either using adapters or figuring out ways to sort of jerry rig so you can use certain lenses that you may like more than others. Or if you're just jumping ship from Canon to Sony or whatever, and you need to purchase new lenses with your new body, it's really expensive. It's definitely not cheap. So at the time of purchasing this Nikon Zf, the cameras I had in my kit were a couple Sony bodies. So I had an A7R2, an A7R4. I had the Komodo OG, the original, and I had a Fuji X100V, or the X105. And those were sort of my cameras. I used obviously the Komodo for all my big commercial cinema work. I used the two hybrid cameras, the two A7Rs for photography mainly, and if I need a B or C camera, I could throw one of those on a tripod and use those for a B camera or a C camera just to get coverage, and they were okay for that. And then I used the X100V for sort of my daily camera. I just wanted something a little bit more than my iPhone, something that had a little bit more pizzazz and just a little bit more fun to it. So I bought the X100V during all the hype, and I carried that for 3 or 4 years actually, and it was amazing, and I loved that camera. One thing I did find over time of using it, the recipes and the camera and the autofocus are all amazing, but the smaller sensor sort of always limited my creativity. I'm not going to say that it's limiting to anybody else's creativity. You can be really creative, and I know a lot of photographers that use that as a main camera, and that's sort of like their bread and butter, and it is an amazing camera. But the smaller sensor and the fixed lens at some point sort of made me feel like I was stuck in a box. So I started looking for alternatives, but I wanted something that had the tactile feel. And the biggest sort of attraction point to the X100 series is the old retro film style. You can make it look like a film camera with a few accessories. It's obviously got some clicky buttons, and then you add the film recipes on top of that, and it's an amazing, fun camera to always have with you. So in my research doing that, I was like, I really want a full frame camera to carry as a daily, but I don't want it to be huge. I don't want to carry my A7s series or any of the other Sony bodies. The one thing about the Sony bodies and even the Canon bodies, they feel very clinical, and they should, because that's what they're for. They're really, really specific use cameras. They're great all around cameras, obviously, but they're made for certain jobs. Those Sony cameras I had are made for high resolution, made for bursting, fast speeds, and just an overall workhorse. They're weatherproof, they're weather resistant, they're great tanks, and they can take a beating. So I had those, but I didn't want to carry those every day. So the X100 sort of fit that mold for me. But at some point I was like, okay, I want to upgrade to a full frame camera and have a few lens options just in case. And that's where I ended up going down the path of this Nikon Zf. There's a ton of videos out there that you can see that are great reviews of it. I'm not going to go into all the specs and the details. The main things that are great about it are obviously these clicky buttons at the top, these clicky dials. They're made out of brass, and they feel like an old film camera. They feel like the old Nikon F camera. And then this retro style 1.2 40mm lens, which is the lens that I actually keep on here 99% of the time. It's amazing. This is a great combo. And again, it's not fixed. So if I do want to either get something longer or something wider, I can do that. I can have the option of switching out the lens. And then the last thing is it's a full frame sensor. What I did not know when I purchased this, and I wasn't really looking for that at the time because I was sort of satisfied in the video department, was the capabilities that this camera has on the video side. Now, I'm not going to go as far as and say that this is an A-roll camera, although if it is your only camera, you can certainly use it as that. But because of the full frame sensor and the amount of Nikon lenses that are available, and then the amount of lenses you can adapt to it, it makes it a pretty compelling video camera because it also shoots 10-bit 422 in N-Log, which is Nikon's log profile. It's an amazing deal to get all of that, and it's a great photography camera. It sits in that sort of A7 IV class, if you will, if you're a Sony shooter, or maybe like a Canon R6 realm, somewhere in there. But I think the capabilities that it gives are actually better, and I will tell you why, and that has to do with this guy right here. I'll put a link to this adapter in the description below. This is the Megadap Z to E-Mount adapter. So I can put this on any Nikon Z-mount camera, and I can adapt all my E-mount lenses. Again, that was a huge attraction point for this camera for me, because all these lenses right here in some fashion are E-mount. In fact, the only lens on here that's not E-mount is this one here, and I will talk about that when we get to the red. But this is a Sony 24-70. This is a Tamron 35-150. This is the Sony G Master 14, and this is the Voigtlander 50mm 1.2 manual focus lens, which is a beautiful lens, by the way. But these are all E-mount lenses. And now with this adapter, I was able to use my Sony bodies I can put all these lenses on my Sony, and I would just keep buying E-mount lenses, as you can see. But I could also now use all these lenses on this everyday sort of driver camera if I wanted to. So if I didn't want to use this super lightweight 40 millimeter 1.2 lens, I could just add one of these lenses to it, and I have either a now B camera, and I'll get into that as a video camera, but I also had just a backup body that I could shoot. So if a Sony went down, or if the job called for 3 cameras for whatever reason, I was able to use this as a third camera. So this camera makes it super flexible for my particular workflow. Okay, so let's fast forward to today, why I decided to buy the Komodo X Z-mount. Aside from the upgrades that the Komodo X already provided from the original Komodo, which is like frame rates, different crop rate factors, and a few other features internally that it was just a better camera. CF Express Type B, which is obviously a better a better media card versus like the original CF Express. Native V-mount support, so you didn't have to put anything else on it. It has pro audio, so you can actually record professional audio directly into it without adding another unit if you want. So there's a lot of great upgrades that the Komodo X already had, but the Z-mount is really what made me jump. I wasn't planning actually to sell that Komodo or upgrade that Komodo for probably at least another 2 or 3 years to see something really major come out from RED. But again, the reason why I did is because of this Z-mount. So with this Megadap adapter, I can still adapt all my Sony lenses to this Komodo, which before I actually couldn't use any of these lenses on the Komodo because of the RF adapter, the RF mount on that was native on the Komodo. So now I can use all my lenses across all my cameras, which is amazing. Or I should say both of these cameras I can use. This camera, again, going back to its video capabilities, because it shoots 422 10-bit N-Log, I can now color grade these almost identically. Now, obviously this doesn't have the dynamic range that the RED camera has, but in a pinch, this is a way better B camera than any of the other cameras that I had in my kit. These two color-wise are almost spot on and can be matched almost identically. And you can use the Red LUT that is available through RED and Nikon to match this to this as your starting point. And that's huge for workflow and speed and just overall look. Anyway, thanks guys for listening to me rant about why I decided to purchase these cameras. We're going to go ahead and get into an autofocus test. This is definitely nothing scientific. It's just me flipping a couple cameras around. We're going to put the camera in front, do a few autofocus tests on myself, and I'll put the camera, put another camera at the top, and we'll look down so we can see what the camera's actually doing on the monitor and see what the results are. Let's get into it. All right, guys, we are back, and let me just explain what's going on real quick with the setup. So now I'm recording on the Red Komodo X with the Z-mount. I've got top down. I've got my Nikon Zf recording top down so we can see everything that's going on the table, and I can explain a few things. So right now I am using the native Nikkor Z lens that I usually use on my Zf. So it's a native Nikon lens to the Komodo, and it seems to be working pretty good right now. Okay, so let's talk about these settings. So right now I've got speed at 2, which is how fast it actually rack focuses. Sensitivity at 0, so that's neutral. I've got the size of the focusing box at medium, so I'll show you in a second, but that's the actual size of the box that it's focusing in, or the things that it's grabbing in focus. I've got position to custom because I've got the face detection on. So in a second, I'll show you, but it's got face detection on. So if I put my hand here, it should focus on my hand. And then when I move it, it should attempt to refocus on my face. And you can see it sort of fluctuating there. So right now I have it set for the face detection parameters. I have face priority, closest found. And if there's no face, it'll continue to autofocus. So meaning like, if something covers my face, it should continue to autofocus to the closest thing. And the interesting thing is, again, I'll see if I can put this down. If you can see that I'm covering my face and the box is still staying green. And then if I completely move out of the way, the box moves and it starts to hunt for autofocus. And it's fluctuating right now. It's actually trying to figure out what to focus in on in the background, which is obviously, that's not great. But this is better than anything that was available on the older Komodo. I never got to try the Komodo X OG. There's no OG, but the original Komodo X RF edition. I assume this is just a software update that was available to those Komodos. To be honest, I did not do the research, so I do not know. So I can't speak for the Komodo X pre Z-mount. Again, this is the 40mm Nikon lens natively mounted. So let's do a quick lens swap and we'll try one of the Sony lenses. Okay, so now we're back and I threw the Sony Zeiss 24-70 on. So now I'm using the Megadap adapter with the Sony lens, and you can see there's already some hunting issues. Now, I don't know, I'm gonna talk through this, even though it's gonna be kind of annoying. I don't know if this is a problem with the Megadapt or the lens, or rebooting the camera, which I'll go through in just a second. I'm gonna reboot the camera and see if we still have the same issues. Okay, we're back. I just rebooted, and let's see if this thing calms down. Looking straight at the camera, and okay, looks like it took a few seconds to lock on my face. I did have to look directly at the camera, but again, this is all trial and error, and this is definitely not a scientific test, but you can see it's more of a real world situation. If you were out in the field and you threw this lens on right away thinking that it was going to work, it may not, and you may have to either figure out sort of a workflow if you need to reboot or detach the lens or whatnot, which I know can be super annoying in a time crunch when you got clients and models and actors on board and on set waiting around for you to do lens changes. But at the same time, you know, to have the ability to use a more wide variety of lens, I think is pretty awesome. We're going to go through a couple more lenses here. I'm going to throw this guy on. This is probably one of the lenses I've been looking forward to the most to putting on the Red Komodo, which is my 14mm G Master, because it's ultra wide. And just to have that on a sensor like that has always been sort of intriguing to me. And, you know, obviously opens up a lot of different creative avenues that you can use when you use a lens that wide. So let's go do another lens swap and see if this Sony lens works better. Okay, so we're back, another lens swap. So now you can see I'm on the 14mm G Master lens, which you can see is extremely wide. Got the field of view. You can see sort of everything that's in frame now and that's available in frame. And obviously one of the benefits of using a super wide lens is the depth of field is obviously not as shallow. So nailing focus is a little bit easier. But right now you can see, I'll show the top camera again. You can see that there's a green box around the center of the frame, so everything is in focus in the center at least, and it also looks like everything else is in focus around me. So one thing that's cool about the port keys monitor that I know is obviously available in the native RED monitors, but I can actually move the focus box. So if I click, you can see that I'm actually hitting the tap to focus and it's moving. So if I move the focus box, you can now see that things are out of focus, and I'll put myself back in focus and you'll see that it's focusing. So it's doing pretty good. I'll tap a few things here in the background and see if it actually picks up like this light behind me. And looks like it did, picked up right away, which is cool. And then again, this other corner, that looks cool. Kind of hunting a little bit here and there, but not as bad as it was on that other lens. Again, I don't know if that is the lens, the adapter, the camera. When I added this lens, just like when I changed the lenses earlier, I rebooted the camera and I left the adapter on the lens, and then I just changed the lens. So who knows? It could be just a workflow. It could be just a bug, and it could be hit or miss. So I'm going to do one more lens swap, and I'm going to swap out to this Tamron 35-150, which is obviously a super intriguing lens to have in your kit because it's got such a wide range. It's also f2 to f2.8 all the way through, which is awesome. So for a telephoto lens to have that much range is really cool. There's a ton of cool videos on this lens if you want to go search it out, but one of my favorite lenses. And to be able to put it on the Red Komodo is super awesome. Okay, so walking into frame, if you're looking from the top down camera, I'll cut to the top down real quick. You'll see that it's sticking on my face pretty well. It's not as snappy, you know, obviously as your hybrid cameras out there, but I'm moving in and out pretty well. And let me move back, and the box is getting smaller and it's still staying on. So again, I don't know if that particular Sony lens that I used earlier, the 24-70 Zeiss, is just a buggy lens with this setup. Or maybe because it's an older lens it's just, you know, it's not up to date with today's standards. It's a pretty old lens. It's probably about, I mean, it's at least 10 years old from when I bought it. I don't know the exact time it came out, but maybe that has to do with it. But it also just may be something that was just kind of buggy with the entire system at the time. But again, I'll move across the frames, and you can see when I come out of frame, it stops focusing, and then I'm back in, and now it seems to land pretty well. And now we're still at 35 millimeter. Let me go ahead and zoom in and see what happens. Okay, so now we're at 70 millimeters, and it seems to be focusing pretty well. Again, I'm moving around the screen. You can see the top down shot. I'm moving around pretty well, and it seems to be locked on. There it goes, locked onto the background, and now it's back on me. So I would definitely use this lens in the field. I feel pretty confident that I would not have any issues. And again, because of the versatility of this lens in general, just what it offers is pretty amazing. So yeah, this is definitely a win. I would totally recommend using this lens with the Megadap adapter and the Red Komodo X Z-mount. I'm going to go ahead and punch in just a little bit more, and we'll see what happens at the end of the 150 range. So I'm back here as far as I can go back in my studio. I could not get the 150 range, and that's just mainly because the minimum focus distance is just not far enough away. But this is pretty good. I'm at 100 millimeters, and I'm all the way back in the back of the studio, and you can see it's focusing on me pretty well. Duck out, jump back in, grabs focus again. The box is following me. If I stay still, it should light up green. Yeah, I would definitely recommend this lens. Okay, guys, so back on the GFX 102, and here's the Red Komodo. So again, this is definitely not a scientific experiment. It was really fun just to mess around and test the autofocus. Also, this is not any length of time using the autofocus, so this is like really my first impressions on the autofocus. I haven't used it enough in the field to really test out. Overall, these first impressions, I'm pretty impressed, pretty satisfied. I think, you know, obviously there's some quirks, and I think if you use native Z-mount lenses, meaning Nikon lenses or lenses that have a Z-mount native and you're not using the additional adapter, there's probably a lot more success hit rates on the autofocus being nailed consistently and at the first try. And again, for me personally, this is pretty game changing because I'm able to use this entire suite of random weird non-Sony lenses plus Sony lenses plus a Nikon lens all in one kit, and I can use it between these two cameras and have sort of an A and a B camera between the ZF and now the Red Komodo X with the Z-mount. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or you want to see any more tests, I will do my best to try to get more and update more of these tests as we go on. If you want to see something a little bit more scientific, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to spend some time and really dig into the menus and see where the sweet spot is. I'm sure there's probably some blanket coverage versions of the autofocus settings that you can use in most scenarios, but then, you know, in a very specific situation, maybe you'll need to dial things in a little bit different. There's a couple other videos that are great out there, other guys testing autofocus with the same mount and different lenses. So I'm just throwing this out there as my first test. Definitely, again, not scientific. If you guys want to hear any more or see any more, let me know. Thanks for sticking around to this entire video, and we'll see you on the next one.